Good morning. At about 7 o'clock this morning, I smiled. I smiled just a little bit. Had my coffee with me, and I thought I would catch a little bit of the morning news. And the segment I had tuned into started off like this: We are nowhere near normal. We are nowhere near normal. And the segment had nothing to do with the coronavirus. What made me smile is it was the weather report. It was the 7 or 8 day forecast. And the week looks like it's going to end on a really positive note. Or I should say, it looks like the weekend is going to begin on a really positive note. Saturday looks like the best day that we've had in spring so far, about 70 and sunny. Lisa was next to me and she said, wow, we get to spend all day outside Saturday. But it was introduced with, we are nowhere near normal, and that all the temperatures for this week are just nowhere near normal. They're below normal. And I just thought that was interesting in all the discussion of things reopening or when things reopen, that we're not going to be near normal. And we may not be near normal for a really long time. And so there is a question about what will things look like as they start to slowly reopen, or as we slowly get back to reaching what is normal for us. And as a church, we have to have that discussion. What will things look like when we're able to get back together? What will things look like as we start nearing what is normal for us? But to think about that even further, who would have ever thought we would have to have that discussion? Who would ever thought that that's the thought would be on our minds in the springtime of what is it going to look like when we're back together on a Sunday morning? Nobody, no one, no pastor, no church leadership could have ever thought as the year began that we're going to have to plan for what it looks like when we're back to normal. And so I started thinking today about unplanned things, the things that happen in our lives that are just not planned. A long time ago, I must have been a teenager. I heard my dad say one time that some of the best things that have happened in his life are those things he did not pursue, or those things for which he did not plan. And I have found that to be true in my own life, that some of the best things that have happened to me are those things for which I did not really plan, those things for which I did not really pursue. Near the top of that list, I never thought at 18 years old I would fall in love with the woman that come this October I will have been married to for 20 years. Furthest thing from my mind. One of the best things that ever happened to me that I never planned for. I told you a few weeks ago, I never wanted to be a pastor, never planned to be a pastor. In fact, all of my plans were the furthest thing from being a pastor. But being a pastor is not one of the best things that's ever happened to me. One of the best things that has ever happened to me is serving as pastor at Calvary Community Church. Something I never planned for, I never pursued. I thank God for it every day. I thank God for that phone conversation on July 13th, 2012. And here I have been enjoying something for almost 8 years that honestly I can say I never really planned for this. So I have been thinking a lot this morning about those things for which we did not plan, that there is a certain wonder to them. certain treasure about them, the things that happen in our lives for which we did not plan. Now, I know, obviously, there's things that happen in our lives that are not good for which we did not plan. There's huge surprises. They're unexpected. But there's also those good things, right? There's also those good things that happen in our lives that when we think about it, I never planned for that. I never pursued that. And it ends up being one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And I thought about that with the book of Deuteronomy. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Those 5 books, they're the first 5 books of the Bible, often called the Torah, or the Law, or the books of Moses. But when you think about it, they were written during a time in which I think most of the people that first read them were experiencing something for which they did not plan. Those books were written to the nation of Israel, to the people of Israel, while they were wandering in the wilderness. And their wandering in the wilderness was not something for which they really had planned. We read in Exodus that the people, the nation of Israel, the people of Israel, had longed for, had cried out that God would deliver them from the people of Egypt, from the nation of Egypt, from slavery. But I don't think, in all their crying out, all their pleading to God to please rescue us, did they ever plan that they would be spending, 40 years wandering in the wilderness? Now, there is a whole lot more to that account, to that story. But think about the things that happened in that wilderness experience. One of the biggest things that happened was God giving, through Moses to the people of Israel, the 10 Commandments. Now, have you ever wondered, why did God not give those 10 Commandments way back in Genesis? I mean, way back with Adam and Eve. How come he didn't hand them the 2 tablets of stone and say, now here, as you leave the garden, and as you raise your family, and as you go throughout the rest of your lives, hold on to these 10 Commandments? No. Something like that, which is often referred to as the Old Covenant, was given during this wilderness experience. And it is, I think, to be one of those wonderful things that come out of that which we did not plan for. And so in Deuteronomy, there is a verse that, again, is not given way back in Genesis with Adam and Eve, or with Noah, or with Abraham, or with Jacob. This is a verse that is given during a time which I think we could say everything was stripped away from Israel. When God rescued them from Egypt, everything was stripped away, their homes. They even complained about it. Life sure was better back in Egypt. I had a permanent home. The food was better. So much of their lives was stripped away. They didn't plan for that. And then here comes Deuteronomy 6. During a time for which they did not really plan. And yet there was a wonder, a treasure, something good to hold on to. And one of those things is Deuteronomy 6. These daily videos are something I never planned. Furthest thing from my mind that I thought I would be doing. And I do hope there's something you're taking away from them. And part of what I hope that you're taking away from them is this: the importance, the wonder, or how good it is to spend time each day, yes, every day, meditating upon God's Word. That yes, it's vital to the day, it's crucial to the day, but I hope it causes a great joy to your day. And when we use the word meditate, we don't mean in the sense of emptying our minds. We mean it in the biblical sense of filling our minds. So when we say meditate upon God's Word, we're saying fill your mind, fill our minds, fill our hearts with God's Word. And so I hope I hope that is a takeaway from these videos for each one of us. How important it is to have time during our day in which we're just meditating upon God's word, feeding on it, putting it into our minds, filling it into our hearts. But back to Deuteronomy 6, I think it does take place during a time in which most of those people would say, I never planned for this. Yet in something I did not plan, look what God is giving me. Look how God has revealed himself to me. Look how God has communicated to me. And one of those verses that he communicated to Israel during a time for which they did not plan was Deuteronomy 6. And I really want to focus on verse 5. But can we read the first 4 verses just to get an idea of why verse 5 is there? I like the first 4 verses, and I want to read the first 4 verses really for this big reason. God talks about your home. God talks about your family before he gives verse 5. And it starts like this. Now this is the commandment, the statutes and the rules that the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over to possess it. That you may fear the Lord your God, that is, stand in reverence awe of him. I think that's part of like Psalm 51:12 when David prayed, restore to me the joy of your salvation. Part of that restoration is I've lost the awe of who you are. That you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, and that your days may be long. Hear, therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, and that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Jump down to verse 6 real quick. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house. So there's this focus on your family, on your home. But let's go back to verse 4. Hear, O Israel. This is great Shema, S-H-A-M-A. I think, or it's either S-H-A-M-A or S-H-E-M-A. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And here it comes, verse 5. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. This is something, if when you go to Matthew 22, a lawyer asked Jesus a question. It's not a genuine question. It's a question to test Jesus, to kind of trip him up. And he says something like this, Jesus, what's the greatest command? And Jesus says this, the greatest command is this, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And then he says, and the second one is like it, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And he says that in these 2 commands, the whole law rests. The law and the prophets all rest on these 2 commands. And the lawyer is taken by surprise and kind of lowers his head and says, well, you've answered correctly. But here's this great command. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And then in verse 6, and these words I command you today shall be on your heart. And he tells them, you got to take this in to that land I'm giving you. And you shall do my commands all the days of your life. It reminded me of something Jesus said in John 14, that if you love me, there's that word love, you will keep my word. So in other words, if you love me, you'll do what I say. And then there's Romans 8:28, which in understanding Romans 8:28, you need the preceding verses. You need like the 27 verses that follow it. And in verse 28 is kind of like this concluding statement. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, or God works all things together for good. And so it seems that as the rest of the Bible unfolds, there's a lot that rests or flows out of this command in Deuteronomy 6. You shall, verse 5, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. So how might we think about that? Well, there's three quick ways. We're not going to dive too deep into this, but there's just three quick ways and thinking about, how do I do this? How do I love God? Well, look where it begins. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. I think this is helpful, that my relationship to God, my loving him, where does it start? It starts from within. It doesn't start with a list of do's and don'ts. My relationship with God does not start with the external. It starts with the internal. Remember something God said in choosing King David, that God looks at the heart of the man. Man looks at the exterior. God looks at the interior. So my love for God, where does it begin? It starts from within. Then he says, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. A way to think about that is, as long as I have breath, I will love God. That with my entire being, I will love God. And I think a helpful way of thinking about that is that as long as I have breath, as long as I live, I will set my mind and my heart to do this each day. I will love him. And then lastly, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all what? Your might. How do we think about that? How do I love the Lord my God with all my strength? I think a helpful way of thinking about that is, I will love the Lord my God with whatever means I have at my fingertips. Meaning, I will love him with the work of my hands. I will love him with whatever I currently have. I will love him in how I use my home. I will love him with whatever occupation I'm giving myself to each day. I will love him. I was telling Lisa yesterday, I sure wish I had some gift to work with my hands. I just admire those that can work with wood or can do anything with their hands. Bricklayers, construction, whatever. I wish I had some ability to work with my hands. And part of the aim here in loving the Lord your God with all your might is the idea of, I will love him with whatever means I have at my fingertips at this moment. And it is just interesting. It comes during this wilderness experience when everything has been stripped away. Before they're going into this land filled with milk and honey, God boils their lives down to this. You must hold on to this. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. It's going to start from within. You shall love the Lord your God with all your soul, that for as long as you have breath, you will love me. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your might. That with whatever means you have for the rest of your life, each day, whatever means you have, you will love me. You will love me with your talent. You will love me with the ability of your hands. You will love me with whatever you have. You will make the best use of it because you love me. And I thought it's just an interesting, helpful way to begin in understanding this really foundational, maybe the most important verse in the entire Bible, that when it comes to me and God, I shall love him. And so I did think in terms of, well, what are things going to look like as we get back to normal? What are things going to look like when we're able to get back together again on a Sunday? What are we going to take with us? Well, there's this. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And think about this. Our circumstances do not dictate our love for him. And think about who this was first told to. It's told to those Israelites as they're wandering around in the wilderness. Your circumstances do not dictate loving God with all your heart. Your circumstances do not dictate loving God with all your soul. Your circumstances do not dictate loving God with all your might. So as we look to getting back together, as we look to getting back to normal, we hold on to this important, greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might.